The hegemony's diplomatic ship was called the Ascending Light. It was a beautiful vessel, smooth, white, and elegant, designed for conversation rather than combat. It carried Ambassador Saith of the Valori, Grand Strategist Morvan, and a small team of Ilhari translators who could decode almost any language in the galaxy. When the ship entered the human solar system, it was immediately surrounded by noise. Radio signals, satellite broadcasts, digital chatter. The humans filled every frequency with an endless stream of communication. They never stopped talking. Saith had barely begun scanning the system when a deep, steady voice cut through the static on their communication array. Unidentified vessel. This is Lunar Command, United Earth Defense Initiative. You have entered restricted space. State your identity and your purpose, or you will be fired upon. You have 60 seconds. They have a military base on their moon? Morvan was already reading the sensor data, and what he saw made the scales on the back of his neck rise. They have bases on their moon, on 2 of their neighboring planets, and on at least 12 orbital stations. They have warships in orbit, hundreds of them. The original survey said they had no faster-than-light technology, Saith whispered. They still do not, Morvan said quietly. They built all of this with basic engines. In 200 years. While we were ignoring them, they were preparing. They identified themselves and asked for a meeting with Earth's leaders. What followed was hours of back and forth as the humans argued among themselves about whether to let the aliens land. Saith found it confusing. Morvan found it fascinating. Even in this moment, the humans could not resist fighting with each other. Eventually, they were given permission to land in a city called Geneva. The landing zone was surrounded by soldiers, men and women in heavy-powered armor, carrying weapons that Morvan's scanners identified as advanced kinetic rifles, plasma blades, and compact energy pistols. Every single one of them looked ready to kill at a moment's notice. They were escorted into a large government building and brought before the United Earth Council. The room was long and serious, filled with representatives from every nation on the planet. At the head of the table sat a woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself as Director Carolyn Holt, chair of the Defense Committee. Before Saith could begin her prepared speech, Holt held up a hand. "We know who you are," Holt said. "We caught your survey ship 200 years ago. We let it go because we wanted to see what you would do. When you decided to lock us away and pretend we did not exist, we decided to get ready. You knew about the hegemony? We have been listening to your communications for 2 centuries, Holt said. We studied the technology your survey ship left behind and built our own versions. We figured that sooner or later you would either come to attack us or come to beg for help." She leaned back and folded her arms. "So which one is it?" Saith explained the Vraxil threat. She described the destroyed colonies, the failed attempts at diplomacy, and the hegemony's complete inability to defend itself. She spoke with the careful grace of a trained diplomat, but Holt's expression never changed throughout the entire explanation. When Saith finished, Holt turned to a broad-shouldered man sitting halfway down the table. He had dark skin, a scarred jaw, and the quiet stillness of someone who had spent a lifetime in combat zones. "Colonel Voss," Holt said. "Your thoughts." Colonel Daniel Voss stood up. He was tall and powerfully built, and when he spoke, his voice filled the room without effort. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. There is an alien hive mind out in deep space that is eating entire planets. Your coalition of dozens of advanced species cannot stop them. And you have come to the species you locked in a cage because you were scared of us, and you are asking us to fight your war." "We are requesting assistance," Saith said carefully. "You are asking us to die for you," Voss corrected. There was no anger in his voice. It was simply a statement of fact. The room went very still. Holt spoke again. "What do we get in return?" Saith listed the terms. Full membership in the hegemony, access to advanced alien technology, trade agreements, diplomatic status among the galactic community. Morvan added the military intelligence they had gathered on the Vraxul, including their estimated numbers and projected path of expansion. Holt studied the data in silence. Then she looked at Voss. "Can we beat them?" she asked. Voss did not pause to think. "We were made for this." Holt turned back to the delegation. "We will give you what you need. But you need to understand something very clearly. We do not fight politely. We do not follow rules of engagement designed by species who have never bled. We fight to win, and we fight to finish things. If you point us at the Vraxul, we will not stop until every last one of them is dead and gone. If that is not acceptable, find someone else." Sayeth swallowed hard. "That is exactly what we need." Within 3 days, Earth began to mobilize. The speed and scale of it stunned the hegemony delegation. Massive carrier ships that the humans had been secretly building in hidden orbital shipyards were loaded with weapons, supplies, and soldiers. Tens of thousands of men and women in combat armor marched into transport vessels with calm, practiced movements, like they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Morvan watched the mobilization from the observation deck of the ascending light. He had studied war his entire life as an academic subject, a thing of the distant past. Watching it come to life in front of him filled him with a feeling he had never experienced before. It was respect mixed with raw terror. Colonel Voss stood on the bridge of the lead carrier ship, the Ironclad. Beside him was his second-in-command, Major Grace Ellison, a lean woman with red hair and a reputation for being the sharpest tactical mind in the entire Marine Corps. She could plan a battle the way a musician plays an instrument, finding patterns and opportunities where others saw only chaos. She looked out at the fleet forming around them. Hundreds of warships, thousands of fighters, an army of predators preparing to be unleashed. "Feels like this is what we've been waiting for," Ellison said quietly. "It is," Voss replied. "Not just us, the whole species." The fleet powered up its engines, drives reverse-engineered from stolen hegemony technology, and jumped to faster-than-light speed. The cage was open, the predators were free, and they were hungry. The Vraxul had taken Nethera Prime, a Dranok agricultural world that had once been home to nearly 8 million people. By the time the human fleet arrived, the planet was already half-eaten. Its surface was cracked and scarred. Its skies were choked with ash and clouds of biological spores that the Vraxul used to break down organic material for feeding. In orbit above the dying world, over 300 Vraxul hive ships floated in a loose formation. They were massive and ugly, living vessels covered in growths of chitin armor and studded with biological cannons that fired concentrated streams of acid and superheated plasma. Around them swarmed tens of thousands of smaller fighter organisms, each one a winged nightmare of claws, teeth, and natural weapons. On the bridge of the Ironclad, General Voss stood in front of the tactical display and studied the enemy formation. The numbers were not in their favor. A young Valori officer named Talon stood nearby. He had been assigned as the hegemony's military observer, a job he had accepted out of a sense of duty and now deeply regretted. His translucent skin was almost white with fear. "There are over 300 capital ships and approximately 40,000 fighter units," Talon said, his voice thin. "Our probability models suggest that even with your fleet, the chances of a successful engagement are—" "We do not use probability models," Voss said without looking up from the display. "We use violence." He reached for the fleet-wide communication channel and opened it. Every ship in the human fleet heard his voice at the same time. "All ships, this is General Voss. We are weapons-free. Formation Sigma 9. Carriers hold at long range and launch all fighter wings. Assault groups, you are cleared for close combat. Priority targets are the 3 largest hive ships. Those are the queens. Kill the queens, and the swarm loses its mind. Do not slow down. Do not pull back. We go straight through them. The fleet surged forward. What happened next was something that no species in the hegemony had ever witnessed before. The humans did not sit at a safe distance and exchange careful shots with the enemy. They charged directly into the Vraxul formation at full speed, guns blazing, and started killing everything in front of them. Human warships crashed into the enemy line like a fist through glass. Kinetic cannons hammered the organic hulls of hive ships with streams of tungsten slugs traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. Nuclear-tipped missiles punched through chitin armor and detonated inside, blowing hive ships apart from within. Directed energy beams carved through fighter organisms by the hundreds, filling space with clouds of burning organic debris. The smaller human frigates danced through the swarm of fighters, their point defense guns chattering in continuous bursts that shredded anything that came close. Human pilots flew with a reckless bravery that bordered on madness, weaving between hive ships, dodging streams of bioacid, and pressing their attacks at ranges so close they could see the individual organisms crawling across the enemy hulls. The Vraxul had never encountered anything like this. Every species they had consumed before had either tried to flee or tried to negotiate. None had ever charged toward them. None had ever attacked with this kind of fury. Their fighter organisms swarmed the human ships, latching onto the hulls and trying to bore through with acid and biodrills. The humans responded by deliberately venting the atmosphere in those sections, blasting the parasites into the vacuum of space. Then they sent squads of armored marines through the damaged corridors to kill whatever was left in hand-to-hand combat. On the ironclad, Major Ellison sat in the Combat Information Center, surrounded by screens showing the positions of every ship in the battle. Her voice was steady and calm as she directed the fight with the precision of a surgeon. Group 3, change your heading to 045 and focus all fire on the second hive ship's engines. Group 7, you have fighters attached to your upper hull. Rotate your ship and scrape them off against that debris cloud. Strike Wing Alpha, you are cleared for a torpedo run on the primary queen ship. Do not miss. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous, savage fighting in the black space above a dying world. The humans lost 23 ships. Over 4,000 men and women died. Some ships were torn apart by concentrated bioacid fire. Others were overwhelmed by swarms of fighter organisms that cracked their hulls open and poured inside. The crews of those ships fought to the last person, using rifles, pistols, knives, and bare hands against creatures that stood twice their height and had claws that could cut through steel. The Vraxul lost 117 hive ships. 2 of the 3 queen vessels were destroyed, and when they died, the drones connected to their neural networks went mad, spinning aimlessly, crashing into each other, attacking everything around them, including their own kind. The human fleet swept through the chaos and killed them all. The 3rd queen ship tried to run. It turned away from the battle and pushed its biological engines to maximum, trying to escape into deep space. Voss watched it on the tactical display. His face showed nothing. Send the wolf pack. A group of fast human destroyers broke away from the main fleet and chased the fleeing queen ship. They ran it down at the edge of the solar system, surrounded it, and hit it with everything they had. The coordinated barrage cracked the living ship open like an egg. Its contents spilled into the vacuum. Biomass, fluid, and the broken body of the queen herself, dead and drifting in the cold. When it was over, the space above Nathara Prime was filled with wreckage. Drifting chunks of dead hive ships, clouds of organic debris, the frozen bodies of fighter organisms tumbling slowly through the void. Talon stood on the bridge of the ironclad and stared at the destruction. His luminous eyes were wide. His hands trembled at his sides. You destroyed them, he whispered. That is what you asked for, Voss said. "We asked for soldiers," Talon said quietly. Voss turned and looked at him. The general's face was calm, but his eyes held something that made Talon want to step backward. It was not cruelty. It was not madness. It was the look of something that had been held back for a very long time and had finally been set free. "We are not soldiers," Voss said. "We are predators, and you kept us in a cage for 200 years. The news of what happened at Nethara Prime spread across the hegemony in hours. For the first time in living memory, the Vraxul had not just been stopped, they had been torn apart. Species that had spent weeks in terror suddenly had hope. But mixed in with the hope was something else, something cold and uncomfortable. Because now they had seen what the humans could do. And every species in the hegemony quietly asked themselves the same question that no one dares say out loud. What happens when the Vraxul are gone and the predators are still here? The victory at Nethara Prime changed the war, but it did not end it. The Vraxul were spread across a vast stretch of the Outer Rim, and their hive fleets still numbered in the thousands. One battle had been won. The war had barely begun. Director Holt authorized the full deployment of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Over 2,000 warships, supported by supply transports, mobile repair yards, medical ships, and enough ammunition to fight for years. General Voss commanded the entire operation, with Major Ellison now promoted to as Chief of Operations. The hegemony provided everything they could: star maps of enemy territory, intelligence reports on Vraxul movements, supply stations and fuel depots along the route. They also sent observers, officers from every member species assigned to travel with the human fleet and send reports back to the Grand Forum. Talon volunteered to continue his role. When asked why, he simply said, "Someone needs to write down what they do. The galaxy needs to understand." What the galaxy came to understand over the following months was that humans did not fight the way anyone expected. The hegemony's military theorists, those few who existed, had assumed the humans would advance slowly and carefully, pushing the Vraxul back system by system, securing territory as they went. The humans did the opposite. Voss sent fast strike groups deep behind enemy lines, ignoring the front entirely. His targets were specific: queen ships. In the Vraxul hive mind, the queens were the brains. Every drone, every fighter organism, every hive ship in a queen's network was connected to her through a neural link. Kill the queen, and every creature in her network lost its coordination. They became confused, disorganized, and easy to destroy. Voss called it the Wolfpack Protocol. Small groups of heavily armed ships would track a queen ship, follow it patiently, wait for the moment when it was most vulnerable, and then attack with everything they had. It was the way wolves hunted on Earth: patient, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. At the Battle of Kethis Nebula, Commander Patrick Dunn demonstrated exactly how effective this approach could be. His task force identified a large cluster of Vraxul hive ships sheltering inside a dense gas cloud. Instead of attacking directly, Dunn positioned his ships around the cloud and fired a spread of plasma warheads into the gas. The entire nebula ignited. The explosion destroyed over 200 hive ships in a single blinding flash of fire. Dunn lost 4 ships. The Vraxul lost an entire fleet. At the siege of Gorath Station, a captured Draenok outpost that the Vraxul had turned into a breeding ground, Captain Lena Marsh led a battalion of Earth Marines in a boarding operation. They cut their way into the station and fought through it room by room, corridor by corridor, for 14 straight hours. The station's hallways were flooded with bioacid. The walls were covered in Vraxul growths that pulsed and oozed. Drones attacked from every direction, dropping from ceilings, bursting through walls, rising from pools of biological fluid on the floor. Marsh's battalion took 30% casualties. Every single Vraxul inside the station was killed. Talon accompanied several of these operations. He watched the humans fight up close, and what he saw changed his understanding of the universe. In one report sent back to the Grand Forum, Talon described a moment during a boarding action on a Vraxul hive ship. A squad of Marines had breached the main hive chamber, a vast dark space filled with warrior drones. Each drone stood over 2 meters tall, covered in chitin armor, armed with claws that could slice through metal and glands that sprayed concentrated acid. The humans entered the chamber and began fighting immediately, Talon wrote. There was no hesitation, no moment of fear or doubt. They moved and killed with a focus that I can only describe as natural, as though they had been designed specifically for this purpose. One young soldier, a corporal named Eddie Saunders, fought 3 warrior drones at the same time, using a plasma cutter in one hand and a combat knife in the other. He was wounded twice during the fight. He did not slow down. He did not stop smiling. When I asked him afterward how he had managed it, he looked at me as though the question confused him, and said, "This is just what we do." The hegemony began to understand something about humans that went deeper than their technology or their tactics. Humans were not simply capable of violence. Violence was part of their nature. They had evolved as pursuit predators, hunters who did not rely on speed or strength, but on endurance. On Earth, their ancestors had chased prey across open plains for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They were built to keep going when everything else stopped. They adapted to heat, cold, desert, jungle, ocean, and mountain. They survived ice ages, and plagues, and famines, and each other. They were not the biggest, or the fastest, or the strongest creatures on their planet. They were simply the ones who never, ever gave up. And now, for the first time in their history, they had found prey worthy of the chase. The Vraxul began to adapt. They were a hive intelligence, and they learned from each defeat. They stopped engaging human fleets directly, and instead attacked undefended hegemony worlds. They launched biological weapons at supply lines. They scattered organic mines through space lanes that could cripple ships. Voss responded by spreading his forces across the front, assigning protection to every major hegemony system, and building a network of sensor outposts to give early warning of Vraxul movements. But the war was grinding. Ships needed repair. Soldiers needed rest. Casualties were mounting, and Earth was very far away. In a quiet moment on the bridge of the ironclad, Ellison said what everyone was thinking. "We are winning every fight, but this war will wear us down eventually. We need to find their homeworld. If we can destroy the central hive mind, the entire species collapses." Voss nodded slowly. "Then we need intelligence. Build me a team, the best we have, whatever it takes." Ellison assembled a special operations unit from the most skilled and dangerous people in the fleet. Their mission was simple to describe and nearly impossible to accomplish: capture a Vraxul queen alive and pull the location of the hive homeworld from her neural network. The team was led by Lieutenant Sam Harlow, a quiet man with steady hands and an almost supernatural ability to stay calm in situations that would break anyone else. His second-in-command was Sergeant Diana Cole, a combat engineer who could build or destroy almost anything with whatever materials were available. The operation was given the code name Blackthorn. Voss looked at the team assembled before him. 12 men and women, the best the human species had to offer. Each one a predator in their own right. "Find me their home," Voss said, "and we end this." Harlow nodded once. "We will bring you what you need, General." The team departed that night aboard a stealth frigate, slipping into the darkness of enemy space like wolves into a forest. Behind them, the fleet held its breath and waited. Operation Blackthorn took 3 weeks to plan and less than an hour to finish. Harlow's team found what they were looking for on the edge of Vraxul territory, a young queen ship, smaller than the others, traveling with a light escort of only a dozen hive vessels. They followed it for 5 days, watching its patterns, studying the way its escort moved, learning the rhythm of its defenses, the way a hunter learns the habits of its prey. On the 6th day, they struck. 2 stealth frigates dropped out of hiding and fired a spread of electromagnetic pulse torpedoes into the escort formation. The weapons detonated in a wave of energy that scrambled the organic nervous systems of the escort ships, leaving them drifting and blind. Before the Queen ship could react, Harlow's team was already burning toward it in a combat shuttle, cutting through the outer hull with plasma torches before the inner defenses could seal. Inside the Queen ship, the world was alive. The walls were made of flesh. The corridors expanded and contracted like the breathing of some enormous animal. The air was thick and warm, and smelled of something sweet and rotten. Bioluminescent veins ran along the ceiling, pulsing with faint green light. And from every shadow, every alcove, every opening in the living walls, drones came pouring out to defend their queen. Harlow's team fought forward. There was no room for tactics in those narrow, breathing hallways. It was close combat. Rifles fired at point-blank range, plasma cutters burning through chitin armor, knives driven into the soft joints between an organism's plating. 2 members of the team fell in the first 3 minutes. A drone dropped from the ceiling onto Corporal Ryan Marsh and drove a claw through his shoulder, before Sergeant Cole put 3 rounds through its skull. A second drone caught Private Amy Lucas from behind and pulled her into a side passage. They heard her fighting for 11 seconds before her radio went silent. The team pressed on. They did not stop. They did not go back for the fallen. That was the mission. That was what it cost. They reached the Queen's chamber at the heart of the ship. The room was enormous, a cathedral of living tissue, its walls lined with neural tendrils that spread outward like the roots of a vast tree. At the center, fused into the floor and the walls, was the Queen herself. She was huge. Her body was bloated and pale, connected to the ship through thousands of organic cables that fed information directly into her mind. She was the brain of her entire fleet. Every drone, every fighter, every ship in her network existed as an extension of her will. When the team entered the chamber, the Queen screamed, not with sound, with thought. A psychic wave of pure rage and terror crashed through the room like a physical force. 3 members of the team dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Blood ran from their noses. Harlow staggered, but did not fall. He walked toward the Queen, step by step, fighting through the pressure inside his skull. In his hand, he carried a neural extraction device, a piece of human engineering designed to interface with alien nervous systems and copy their stored data. He reached the Queen. She thrashed in her organic cradle, her tendrils whipping through the air. One of them caught Harlow across the chest and threw him backward. He hit the wall hard, felt something crack in his ribs, and got back up. He walked forward again. He placed the device on the Queen's skull. He activated it. "Nothing personal," he said. The extraction took 11 minutes. The Queen's neural network was vast and complex, but the device was designed to be thorough. It pulled everything: star charts, fleet positions, communication frequencies, and buried deep in the oldest layers of the Queen's memory, the coordinates of the place the Vraxel called home. The Queen died during the extraction. Her body went still, and every drone on the ship collapsed at the same moment, their connection to the hive mind severed. The team walked out through corridors of dead tissue, carrying their wounded and their data. Cole decrypted the information on the shuttle ride back to the fleet. "I have it," she said, her face pale in the glow of the holographic display. "Their homeworld. They call it the Cradle. It is deep in the outer rim, past the dead zone. No hegemony ship has ever gone that far." When Voss received the intelligence, he called a war council. The meeting was short. There was only one decision to make, and everyone in the room already knew what it was. We go to the cradle. We finish this. The assault on the Vraxul homeworld was the largest military operation in human history. Every available ship was gathered. Reinforcements arrived from Earth, fresh crews, new vessels, enough firepower to crack a planet. The final fleet numbered over 3,000 warships and nearly 500,000 soldiers. The cradle system was dark and ancient. A dim red star hung at its center, casting a weak, bloody light over a single massive planet. The planet's surface was entirely covered by the hive, a world-spanning organism of breeding pits, neural towers, and biofactories that produced drones and ships without end. In orbit above it floated hundreds of hive ships, and filling the space between them drifted millions of fighter organisms. It was everything the Vraxul had. Their entire civilization gathered around the world that had birthed them. Voss stood on the bridge of the ironclad and looked at the tactical display. Red filled every corner of the screen. Beside him, Ellison was running calculations. Talon stood in the back of the bridge, his glowing skin flickering rapidly with colors that had no name. "That is a lot of them," Ellison said quietly. "Yes, it is," Voss agreed. He opened the fleet channel. His voice reached every ship, every soldier, every pilot in the armada. "All ships, this is General Voss. What you see in front of you is everything the Vraxul have. Every queen, every drone, every ship. This is where they come from. This is where they breed and plan and send their fleets to eat worlds and wipe out civilizations that never did them any harm. Today, we take it from them. Today, we show every species in this galaxy what happens when you wake the predators. All ships, attack." The Battle of the Cradle lasted 18 hours. It was the most violent event the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human carriers launched wave after wave of strike fighters. Battleships exchanged fire with hive ships at ranges so close their hulls nearly scraped against each other. Marines boarded enemy vessels and fought through corridors of acid and chitin. Destroyers made ramming runs against queen ships, driving their armored bows straight through organic hulls at full speed. Commander Dunn led his wolf pack into the center of the enemy fleet and personally destroyed 3 queen ships before his vessel was crippled. He transferred to a smaller ship and kept fighting. Captain Marsh took her Marines down to the surface of the planet itself. The ground assault on the central hive node was hell made real. Humans in powered armor fought warrior drones in trenches carved from living tissue. Plasma fire burned the organic ground. The air was filled with spores and screams, and the constant terrible hum of the dying hive mind. Marsh reached the central node with less than half the soldiers she started with. She planted antimatter charges around the neural core of the entire planetary network. She armed them, pulled her surviving Marines back to a safe distance, and triggered the detonation. The explosion vaporized the central node and sent a shockwave through every Vraxul on the planet and in orbit. Their neural network collapsed. Drones went insane, attacking everything around them, including each other. Hive ships lost power and drifted. Queen ships screamed one last psychic cry and went dark. The human fleet pressed forward without hesitation. Every surviving Vraxul ship was hunted down and destroyed. Every drone was killed. The planet was subjected to sustained orbital bombardment until the surface burned clean. When it was over, the cradle system was silent. Voss stood on the bridge and looked at the wreckage. The fleet had lost nearly a third of its ships. Over 60,000 humans were dead. But the Vraxul were gone. Not beaten, not pushed back, but extinct. Talon walked up beside him. The young Valori's glow was dim. His eyes were hollow. "It is finished?" he asked. "It is finished," Voss said. You destroyed their entire species. That was the job. Talon was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, General, when this is over and you go home and the galaxy calls you heroes, what then? What do predators do when there is nothing left to hunt? Voss turned to look at him. For the first time since Talon had known him, the general smiled. It was not a warm smile, it was the smile of something ancient and patient. We go home, Voss said. We raise our children. We build things. We argue about politics and sports and whose turn it is to do the dishes. We write music and paint pictures and fall in love. He paused. And we wait. Wait for what? For the next thing that needs killing. That is the most terrifying thing anyone has ever said to me. Voss put a hand on his shoulder. You are welcome. The fleet turned for home. Behind them, the cradle burned. The galaxy was safe. The predators were going back to their small blue world on the edge of the western spiral arm. They would put away their weapons and pick up their children and sit in their gardens and look up at the stars. And every species in the hegemony, from the luminous Valori to the ancient Dranok to the smallest Gilhari, understood one truth that would stay with them for the rest of their history. The humans were not heroes. They were not saviors. They were the thing that lived in the dark, the thing with patient eyes and sharp teeth that waited quietly until it was needed. The galaxy had known peace for nearly 4,000 years. The hegemony of united species was a coalition of alien civilizations that had given up war long ago. They traded, they talked, they built beautiful cities on distant worlds and spent their time studying the stars. The Valori, tall, glowing beings with skin like glass, kept the peace between species. The Dranok, six-limbed reptiles with brilliant minds, managed the trade routes that connected every inhabited system. The Ilhari, tiny insect-like creatures who spoke through musical vibrations, ran the communication networks that held everything together. None of them remembered what war felt like. None of them had armies. None of them had soldiers. And that was the problem. The Vraxul came from beyond the edge of known space. No one had ever seen them before. They did not send messages. They did not ask for trade or territory. They simply appeared. Enormous living ships the size of small moons, covered in organic weapons that were part flesh and part machine. Their hulls pulsed with a sickly green glow, and they moved through space like a swarm of insects, searching for food. Their first target was a Dranok farming colony called Nephara 6. 8 million people lived there. Families, children, workers who spent their days tending to crops that fed dozens of worlds. The Vraxul descended on the planet like a plague. They did not invade it. They ate it. They stripped the surface bare, drained the oceans, and harvested the atmosphere. In 3 days, there was nothing left but a gray, dead rock, floating in silence. The news spread across the hegemony like a disease. Fear followed it. High Chancellor Vathos of the Valori called an emergency meeting on the capital world of Selunar Prime. Every species sent their representatives to the Grand Forum, a vast hall beneath a dome of living crystal. The air buzzed with panic. Delegates shouted over each other. The Ilhari were so distressed that their harmonic cries caused physical pain to those standing nearby. Vathos stood at the center of the hall. His translucent body flickered with shades of dark purple, which among his people was a sign of deep fear. He raised his hand for silence, and slowly the chamber quieted. "We have sent 3 diplomatic missions to the Vraxul," he said, his voice heavy. "None of them came back. We have tried to talk to them on every frequency, in every language we know. They do not answer. They do not negotiate. They consume, and they are moving toward our inner worlds." The chamber erupted again. Voices overlapped. Some demanded action, others demanded retreat, a few simply wept. It was Grand Strategist Morvan of the Dranok who brought order. He was old, his scaled hide covered in scars from decades of academic work, not battle. He rose from his seat with the slow, deliberate movement of someone who had spent his life thinking about wars that his species had never fought. "Let me be clear about our situation," Morvan said. His voice was flat and calm, which somehow made it more frightening. "We have no military. We have orbital defense platforms designed to stop smugglers and small pirate ships. Against the Vraxul, these defenses are meaningless. We need warriors. We need a species that knows how to fight, how to kill, and how to win. And we do not have one." "Then what do you suggest?" Vathos asked. Morvan turned to his data console. He pulled up a file that had been buried deep in the hegemony's records for over 200 years. The file was simple. It was labeled Species 7 Alpha, Earth, Humans. 212 years ago, Morvan began, a Valori survey ship discovered a small blue planet in the western spiral arm. The species living there called themselves humans. They were evaluated for membership in the hegemony. And, Vathos prompted, they were rejected, unanimously. The survey team recommended permanent quarantine, no contact, no trade, no sharing of technology. The humans were to be left completely alone. "Why?" asked a delegate from the back of the chamber. Morvan paused. He looked around the room at the hundreds of faces watching him. Because they were the most violent species anyone had ever encountered. The silence that followed was absolute. The survey report described a species that had been at war with itself for its entire history, Morvan continued. Not occasional conflicts, constant, unending war. They fought over land, over resources, over ideas, over religion, over pride. They developed weapons of terrifying power. They split the atom and used it to destroy entire cities. They created poisons that could kill millions. They built machines designed for nothing but killing other humans. He let the words settle. But here is what made the survey team truly afraid, Morvan said. Despite all of this, despite centuries of slaughter and destruction, the humans did not destroy themselves. They survived. Every time they tore their civilization apart, they rebuilt it stronger than before. They adapted to every disaster, every plague, every catastrophe. They did not merely endure violence. They fed on it. It made them better. Vathos stared at Morvan. And you want to contact them? You want to bring these creatures into our coalition? I want to point them at the Vraxul, Morvan said simply, and let them do what they were born to do. The debate lasted for hours. Many delegates argued against it. The humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. What if they turned on the hegemony after the war? What if they could not be controlled? Morvan listened patiently to every objection, and then said, "You are right to be afraid of them. But right now, the Vraxul are eating our worlds. In 6 months, they will reach Selenar Prime. You can be afraid of the humans, or you can be dead. Those are your choices." The vote passed. Not everyone agreed, but enough did. A diplomatic ship would be sent to Earth. They would find the humans. They would explain the situation. And they would ask the most dangerous species in the galaxy to save everyone else. Vathos watched the delegates file out of the chamber. His skin still flickered with dark purple. "What if they say no?" he asked quietly. Morvan gathered his files and stood. "Then we are all dead. But I do not think they will say no. Predators do not refuse a hunt. They have been locked in a cage for 200 years. When we open the door, they will come out running." He paused at the exit and looked back. "I only hope we can put them back when it is over."